أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكر شهادة أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, may Allah increase in our reward for remembering and commemorating the shahadat of our master Amir al-Mu'mineen. As these are the nights of shahadat of Quran al-Natiq, the speaking Quran, we continue our conversation from the Quran and continue to learn the lessons that Allah has given us in the Quran in these nights as well. We've reached in our discussion up to the 19th juz of the Holy Quran, which includes Surah Furqan, Surah Shu'ara, and Surah Naml, or part of Surah Naml. In these three surah, there are some verses which are important to discuss, and we'll do our best to discuss a few of them before we continue further. In the 63rd verse of the 25th surah, Surah Furqan, 63rd verse, there begins a description and a conversation about the attributes of people who keep faith. And these attributes, where over 10 attributes are listed, are described in the sense to explain to us that when we profess Iman internally, and we profess to have faith internally, it has some visible presences. It's not possible that someone who possesses faith, their character, their mannerism, their actions externally are no different than a person who doesn't have faith. We would say, what's the point of having faith then if it doesn't make a physical difference? If it has no physical presence in society, then there's no real benefit to it. So what we see is that Allah is describing that when you profess to have faith, when you try to develop your character and develop faithfulness in your personality, it's going to manifest itself in your behavior. It's going to change how you act with society. It's going to change how you act with your environment. It's going to change how you act with your family, relatives, in all of these places. So for a person to be able to understand, am I progressing along the path of faith? Am I becoming a better human being? Is my faith actually something that I really believe in? Allah is giving these measurements and these characteristics that you can take a look for yourself and see. And it also gives us direction that as I grow my faith, I need to work on these factors as well too. My faith, if it's something that I believe internally, but it doesn't reflect externally, is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is saying one thing and doing another. So if I say I have faith, but my actions don't show that faith, I'm a hypocrite. So these instructions of Allah in terms of character are important. We'll mention the first one when we take a look at verse number 63. وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. The first thing that Allah says that happens is that those who are the servants of the All-Beneficent, of the Merciful, Rahman, are those who walk humbly on the earth. Their approach to walking on the earth and how they progress from one place to another doesn't reflect pride, doesn't reflect, for example, self-conceit. And Allah continues, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا, and that if an ignorant person addresses them, they say peace. These two attributes are very important. The first one about walking on the earth peacefully. There's a narration that comes from our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that as the Prophet was walking by a place, he saw a group of people gathered. So he asked them, he says, why did you gather? They said, there's a madman over there and we're watching him do crazy things. And Rasulullah looked over in that direction, then he looked back at them and he says, shall I tell you who a true madman is? And I said, yes, Rasulullah, tell us. So the Holy Prophet says to them, he says that a true madman is one who walks on this earth with his shoulders hung back and his arms swinging at his side, not in care of any human being around him, not in care of how it impacts anyone else, just that he shows his gait in a way that reflects his own superiority in his mind, that he thinks he's amazing, he's great, and it shows in the way he walks and behaves. He says someone who behaves like that is truly crazy, that they have no idea of what they are, and they have no idea where they're going, but they do it with pride. And they have this self-conceit about them. This is where we see the statement of Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he says, man is a strange thing. He comes from a drop of semen which is impure, and he ends his life as a jasad, as a dead body, which is also impure. And in between these two states of impurity, he walks around as a container of impurity. What does man have to be proud about? He comes from impurity, he ends at impurity, and in the middle he is a container of impurity. Look, in us we have all sorts of excrement, as well as even the blood that keeps us alive. As long as it's inside of us, it's clean. As soon as it comes outside of us, it's najis as well too. There's nothing that comes out of man that's pure or clean in this way. So the Prophet's lesson was to explain that humility is important for us, and that one who is humble is the one who has faith. And then he concludes his statement. He says, the madman is the one who walks with self-conceit, swinging his arms, throwing back his shoulders, and being proud of himself. He says that is true madness, that knowing what we are and knowing what we should be and knowing what Allah has created us from, you still have pride in yourself. That's madness. He says this person who you're looking at isn't mad. He's sick. He's a patient. And Rasulullah explains the difference between these two statuses. So we see the first characteristic, يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا, that one who keeps faith walks on the earth with humility. And then وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا السَّلَامَ, that if, for example, an ignorant person speaks to a believer, a worshipper of Allah, he replies with peace. What's important we know is that as time progresses and there's a lot of things that are changing in the world, that the reply to ignorance by a believer is peace, salam. We don't get into an argument, we don't fight with them, we don't cause trouble with them. And the reason this is important to know is that in this age of anonymity, where I can go online and I can post anything and I can comment on anything and I can do all of these things, that it still is important that my actions reflect my character. And that even these actions Allah will hold us to account for. We see a lot of ignorance in this day and age from people who don't know better, they don't understand better. But instead of arguing and fighting with them or calling them names or abusing them, we speak to them with peace as Allah has instructed us, and that's a sign of our faith, that we don't feel the need and the urge to engage with every inappropriate or wrong comment that we hear from every direction. This discussion that begins in verse 63 continues until we get to verse number 74, which is close to the end of the surah, where after describing all the attributes of the mu'mineen, Allah finishes with one line on them, وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ, that all of these characteristics that are present in the believers, after they're completed in the believers, the believers are those who say, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Allah explains, He says that the mu'mineen are those who make this dua, and this dua is a part of their faith. They say, O Lord, grant us comfort in our spouses and our descendants, and make us imams of the God-worthy, of the muttaqeen, of the pious ones. This describes that once someone achieves iman, this is the dua that they make, that they should have happiness, sufficiency, coolness of their eyes in their spouses and children, and that Allah should make them imams of the pious people. Now there was a time where, for example, understanding this verse, it was believed that some still say that to ask to be an imam, we don't have the caliber to ask to be an imam. Someone like Nabi Ibrahim is who asks to be an imam. However, many mufassirin have explained that there's no harm and no haraj in asking Allah to make us leaders of good people. And we need the help of Allah for guidance in goodness as it is. So that this dua is actually mustahab for all of us to make. And it's a good dua for us to make that the coolness of our eyes be in our children. We see our children go in good paths. We see our children grow up in good directions. We see our children perfect the faith that we give them, and they complete the efforts that we initiated with them. These are important attributes and characteristics we want to have for the sake of our children as well too, and that we want them to have these qualities, so therefore we need to ask Allah for them. So again, Surah Furqan, the 25th surah, the 74th verse includes a dua that mu'mineen should ask for. And Allah is saying the mu'mineen are the ones who ask this dua. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. Oh Allah, make from amongst our spouses and our children the coolness of our eyes. That we see our families, we see our spouse and our children on the path of Allah. That we feel satisfaction when we look at them. That we are completed when we see them in the behaviors that they make. That they're not a source of discomfort and pain for us. And then, وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, and make us leaders amongst the pious people. And this is an important dua for us as well too, that we become people who live the values of Allah in such a way that we can be helpful in promoting these values in society and community and growing people in this direction. So, inshallah, we take the benefit, and inshallah at some point in time we'll have an opportunity, we'll review all of the characteristics that Allah discusses at some point in time. But in the meanwhile, we've begun the conversation that from 63 begins the conversation of the attributes of the people who have faith in Allah, and it ends in 74 with those who are making the dua of how they want their family to continue down this path and that they should be the leaders of the mu'mineen. The next surah we take a look at is Surah Ash-Shu'ara, the poets. And this surah has many discussions in it of the various anbiya. There's a mention of over 5 anbiya in this surah, 6 or 7 I believe in total. And their discussion about their attributes and the events of, for example, Nabi Musa, and then Nabi Nuh, and then Nabi Saleh, Nabi Hud. All of these anbiya are mentioned. Now, there's very briefly one thing that I want to take a look at. In verse number 109, وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. When Allah mentions 5 of these prophets, and I made the notes of all of them, when Allah mentions the 5 of these prophets in here, He mentions a statement that as they introduce their communities to the religion of Allah, the communities, when they ask them, would you like a reward? Can we reward you for the goodness that you've given us? Each of them replies with the same reply. This verse number 109, is repeated in the surah 5 times. And it's said by Nabi Nuh in verse number 109. It's said by Nabi Hud in verse number 127. It's said by Nabi Saleh in verse number 145. It's said by Nabi Lut in verse number 164. And it's said by Nabi Shu'aib in verse number 180. Each of them makes the statement, وَمَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. I don't ask you any reward for it. My reward lies only with the Lord of the worlds. Each of these anbiya comes to the conclusion and explains to the people that we didn't do this so that you would appreciate us. We didn't do this so you would give anything to us. We did this so that Allah would reward us, and our reward we expect only from Allah, not from you people. 5 times it's mentioned in this surah. In total in the Quran, ayat similar to this are at least 9 times where Allah shows that the anbiya never wanted a reward from the people and never asked anything from the people. One of the exceptions to this is our holy prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, that when people asked him for a reward, he gave a different answer according to the command of Allah. And one is actually in Surah Furqan, verse number 57. قُلْ مَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ, that he too says, I don't want any reward from you. But then he continues, إِلَّا مَنْ شَاءَ أَنْ يَتَّخِذَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِ سَبِيلًا, except that anyone who wishes to take the way to his Lord. This is one answer. The other more famous answer of our Holy Prophet that will come in the Quran and later sections of the Quran, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. that I don't want any reward from you for my actions except that you have love for my near ones. Both of these verses point to reality that Rasulullah was giving instruction, that all of the other Anbiya gave instruction that we don't want any reward, only Allah will give us our reward for what we've done for you. But Rasulullah explains in both of these, he's explaining إِلَّا مَنْ شَاءَ أَن يَتَّخِذَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِ سَبِيلًا, except for the one who wants to take the clear path to his Lord. إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَةِ, that the ones that I love and my near ones, they are the ones that will guide you to the right path and to Allah. Therefore, my reward, if you want to reward me, love them so that you remain close to Allah and you attain victory and success. This becomes a major point for us to understand that our Prophet gave us instruction, and he was commanded to give us instruction, that there is something that you can do to reward our Holy Prophet for the message that he gave us, and that's to treat his close relatives with good relation and take care of those relationships with them. And the explanation of these verses, inshallah, may Allah give us tawfiq that we can spend more time on it at a later point in time as well too. The other verse that I want to take a look at in Surah Shu'ara is verse number 214. Verse number 214 in Surah Al-Shu'ara starts talking about the process of how our Prophet began the public propagation of the message of Islam. The first 3 years, our Prophet only introduced the message of Islam quietly to people individually or in small sets, but not publicly to the community at large. In verse number 214 now begins the mention of how our Holy Prophet was commanded to publicly announce the message of Islam to society. So we see that it says, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ وَاخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Verse number 214, which is a very short verse, where it says, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, that Allah now commands the public process of announcing the message by introducing the message of Islam to his family. And we know famously that this is the event of Da'wat Dhul Ashira, the event of inviting the close family for a meal and to invite them to the religion of Islam. And we know that over 40 relatives came to this da'wat, came to this invitation, and they were invited to follow the message of Islam, but the only one who accepted to take the position of the supporter of our Holy Prophet and to stand up with our Holy Prophet was our Master Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. These verses begin the process of propagation of any good cause. When we want to bring a good cause amongst society, when we want to make an improvement amongst the people, when we want to be an example for the world to change for the better, we begin with our family and our near relatives the same way that the public annunciation of the message of Islam was begun with the family of the Holy Prophet. What that means to say is, don't force your family into, for example, following your example or try to force them to goodness. That's not what it means. What it's talking about is that the same way we talked about وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا is a given explanation that the characteristics that we've developed in Surah Furqan, we've taken a look at, that the pious are the ones who, when they're ignorant or spoken to them, they speak with peace. Now the message is coming that once you've established the characteristic of faith that you want to have, how do we begin the process of propagation? And it begins at home, and it begins with kindness, and it begins with good character, and it begins with good-natured commentary and not forcing people and lowering our wing. That's why verse number 215 says, وَاخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِمَنَ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And it continues, فَإِنْ عَصَوْكَ فَقُلْ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. That it gives two instructions. It says that if you begin the process of preaching this kindness, if they listen to you, show kindness to them and be humble to them, lower your wing to them. But if they disobey you, say, I am absolved of what you do, that you do what you want to do, and that's fine. But at least I gave the responsibility of introducing the message of Allah to you. So these are important points for us to understand, that first off, develop our character individually and work on those characteristics that reflect the physical manifestation of faith. And then once you've done that, then now in the process of introducing our good qualities or introducing the path of Islam to others begins with our family, that we invite our family to do these good actions, but we invite them with the character and akhlaq of Rasulullah, that we do it with kindness and without force. We do it with good naturedness, we do it with good behavior, and we begin this process at home, and if they follow us, then we show them extra kindness. But if they choose that they don't want to follow us or that they're not listening to this path, it's not that we turn away from them in anger, but that we don't force them. We don't become people who become an obstacle in our own households, that cause pain and anxiety by our presence in the household, that if you don't listen to me, I'm going to make your life miserable. And these are lessons for us to understand, and take a look at the verses of Revelation as they've been explained to us and how Allah commanded our Holy Prophet to perform them. The next surah, again very briefly, we're moving along, is Surah An-Naml. Surah An-Naml talks about the story of Nabi Sulaiman, and Nabi Sulaiman being able to have, or having been given a kingdom and authority on this earth, in which he had an army of both the men, the jinn, and the birds, that he had authority over all of these things. And famously is a story in this of the Queen Sheba. This surah and this conversation refers to an event where the hudhud bird, the hoopoe, was a bird who came to Nabi Sulaiman and told him that I saw a kingdom in which the people are led by a queen, and that queen and these people, they are led astray because they worship the sun and not Allah. And thus begins the conversation of Nabi Sulaiman, working to bring these people to the worship of Allah. This surah, this conversation that begins approximately, for example, verse number 20, that starts talking about when Nabi Sulaiman started asking about the hoopoe and where did the hudhud go and why hasn't it come, begins the story of Queen Sheba. Queen Sheba is an example for us in where the Quran is talking about the role and the authority of women. This story about people being led by a queen doesn't show that women aren't capable of being leaders. As a matter of fact, it shows that women are quite competent leaders. That this queen is the one who took counsel when she received the message from Sulaiman. She discussed with her advisors about how they should respond to the letter of Sulaiman, which said that accept this faith, or that I will come against you. Do not defy me and come to me in submission. أَلَّا تَعْلُوا عَلَيَّ وَأَتُونِي مُسْلِمِينَ. In verse number 31, that this was the message of Sulaiman. When she receives this message that do not defy me and become Muslims and follow the religion of Islam, the Queen of Sheba doesn't turn around and give a bad answer or anything. She calls her advisors and says, how do you suggest that we deal with this? And the advisors, they come and they present to her with opinions, and they say, hey, listen, we have a big army, we could defend ourselves, or we could do whatever you want to. You have the discretion and you are the one in charge. And then the Queen of Sheba, she gives an explanation. She says, قالت إن الملوك إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها وجعلوا أعزة أهلها أذلة وكذلك يفعلون. That she says, if I am to make a decision about how we're going to deal with the message of Sulaiman, she said, certainly when a king enters a town, they devastate it. That if we go into this fight, that this town will be devastated, or whichever town the kingship and authority enters into will be devastated. And they reduce the mighty of his people to the most abased. That those who are in power will wind up in the worst of conditions. Looking at this about how the impact of war has devastation on people, and that, for example, that the best of them, those who are making these decisions, will be in the worst of condition, she makes the intelligent decision and she says, let's try making a peace treaty. Let's send him a gift and try to build a relationship with this Nabi Sulaiman, where he allows us to be independent and free without having to get into a fight. This demonstrates her knowledge and her intellect and her ability to look at things and make treaties and make peace and take into consideration the impact decisions have on people. All of these are examples for us. The Queen of Sheba is an example of the Quran telling us of the authority of women on this earth, and that it's okay, and that they can be in roles of leadership and they can guide their people correctly and make good decisions. And we see that the Queen of Sheba comes, and Nabi Sulaiman doesn't say, you're a woman, get away from me, I can't talk to you. No, He works with her, he introduces her to the religion of Islam, he shows to her the authority of Allah on this earth, and she submits to Islam. All of these are examples for us that talk about the role of women in society and that give us an explanation that Islam never forbade women from being a part of society, never forbade them from taking charge and to helping people and to working with people, and never put them in a position that they're second-class citizens. No. The Queen of Sheba is a queen of people, and she's an example that Allah took importance to mention in the Quran, which reinforces Islam is not a religion that puts women as second-class citizens. Islam is not a religion that reduces the status of our daughters and our sisters and our mothers. And we have that obligation that don't let cultural influences or environmental influences change the responsibilities that women are capable of and are entitled to in Islam. That they are just as much worshippers of Allah as the men are. And they have just as much of an obligation to do goodness and to show kindness and to show leadership amongst people as men do. And that they can accomplish just as much as anyone else can for the religion of Islam. This brings us to the discussion of continuing that tonight marks, after Maghrib, will begin the 20th of Ramadan. It's the time when Amir al-Mu'mineen is suffering with a poison. They said that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he was struck on his head, he was struck in the same place he had been injured in the battle of Khandaq. And that now when the wound was open, that it was filled with poison and he was in a state of great difficulty. When they showed the poison to the doctors of the time, the doctors replied, "The poison that your father Amir al-Mu'mineen has been struck with was sufficient that if it was given to the entire town of Kufa, all of the inhabitants of Kufa would have died from it." This is a night of difficulty on the family of Ali Muhammad as they see Amir al-Mu'mineen in this condition. But it's not just the children of Amir al-Mu'mineen who are suffering. Amir al-Mu'mineen was the one who in silence every night would go to the houses of the widows and the orphans and give food to the children. Tonight those orphans are sitting and waiting. They said, "We saw the orphans come into the streets of Kufa. That there was one who would come to us every night and come and spend time with us and give us food and show kindness. Why hasn't he come to us tonight? Why is he not with us? Where is our caretaker? Where is our friend? Where is our imam? Where is the Amin who would come to us?" They said that in this night we saw the orphans exit into the streets of Kufa looking, "Where is our helper? Where is our supporter?" They were told in these nights that Amir al-Mu'mineen is suffering from a poison. He is your supporter. He is the one who would come to your houses and show you kindness. They said, "Let us then find, is there a way we can cure our helper? Is there a way we can cure Amir al-Mu'mineen?" Amir al-Mu'mineen was that one who is described most famously, that an orphan, when they would be abused, when they would be spoken to with harsh words, when they would be mistreated, they had no other father to go to, but they had certainty as long as Ali ibn Abi Talib is there, someone cares for us and someone will protect us and comfort us in difficulty. Tonight their caretaker is in a state of difficulty. The orphans exit into the streets and they say that what can we do to save our master? It was said that milk may be a helper for Amir al-Mu'mineen because of this poison. So it said the orphans of Kufa and Najaf came out with milk and said, "If this milk will save Ali ibn Abi Talib, we will make the sacrifices to somehow save his life for us." There is no other one who has his hand over the heads of the orphans, which is why there is no one who has their hand over the faithful, which is why for us we are as the orphans of Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is a time of difficulty and destruction for us as well, that we are losing our master and our father of our spirit. It's described that this poison, the severity of the poison, as the doctors explain, had it been put in the water of the people, all of the people would have died from this poison. Yet Amir al-Mu'mineen persisted and he remained alive even with the presence of the poison in his body. There are two personalities we have seen in history that in our A'imma who continued to live regardless of the extreme difficulty because of the concern they had. One was Abu Abdullah in Karbala, that when the sword was being put to him when he was alone, and there was a hujum over Hussein ibn Ali, and they came at him with swords and spears, when they stabbed him and he lay on the ground covered in his own blood, they said, has Hussein ibn Ali died? Is he finished? Mal'un Shimr replied, mention the name of his sister. If Hussein is alive, he will move. They mentioned the name of Zainab. Hussein's body began to move. In those moments, his hands and his feet moved, and he said, Hussein remains alive. Stay away from my women and children. The same way Amir al-Mu'mineen, that poison may have killed everyone, but Ali ibn Abi Talib stayed alive. My daughter Zainab Kulsum, the difficulties you will face after me. Your father persists and remains alive in difficulty so that my hand remains over you. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. يا محمود بحق محمد، يا أعلى بحق علي، يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة، يا محسن بحق الحسن، يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. O Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws by the barakat of the month of Ramadan. O Allah, accept our fasting and our prayer and our ibadat. O Allah, in these nights of Qadr, make us from amongst the pious whose du'as are accepted and who you set a good path for in the years to come. O Allah, we ask that you keep our children on the upright path in the religion of Islam. We ask that you remove the difficulties and the sickness from all of the mu'mineen wherever they may be. Answer the hajat of the mu'mineen, remove the difficulties of the mu'mineen, and give them security wherever they may be. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of the religion of Allah and the supporters of Sahib al-Zaman, and entitle us to Shifa'a of Imam al-Hussein in dunya and in akhirah. 1 time Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas for all of our marhumeen and those in need of shifa'a, and your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.